Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the guitarist, drummer, songwriter and also label boss. It's the one and only Mark Flunder, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Has been in a lot of bands. I won't name them all, but just as a taster, there's the McTells, television personalities. There was also CB of Beaumont and various other combos that we'll speak about in this fascinating interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Mark, it's over to you.
I'm a little bit older than you. I was born in 62 and I always kind of liked music. I think my mum always had kind of musical stuff on it, but like it's funny, like when I distinctly remember listening to before I went to secondary school in 73, and I liked Gary Glitter as well and Slade. Yes. But I was really into the Beatles and the Shadows. And I think there'd been whenever That'll Be the Day film came out, you know, there was an LP that was all rock and roll stuff. So in a funny way, I kind of tracked the kind of the history of rock in a way. I was really into sort of those rock and roll records, like, you know, nothing obscure, you know, like Everly Brothers and things like that. But then quickly I got into listening to Beatles, and I remember I had in those days before eBay, and I was at the little classifieds in the local paper. Someone was selling some Beatles records, and I'd saved up. I had £4, and they were selling them for £1 each. And I remember going up there, and my mum giving me a lift. I was about 10, or something, and I wanted them all, but I could only buy 4 of them, you know. And,
right.
But then I had a lot of really liked the Shadows, and so really in the early 70s, I was listening to kind of 60s music in a way, but I did like, as I say, Slade and the Glitter Band and things. And there was I think my older brother had a David Bowie compilation. I just loved things like Rebel Rebel and all that. And so it was all there. And then I started listening to John Peel just as punk kind of sort of happened. So in 76, I was too young to go to anything, but like it just like kind of happened at the right time for me. And then, go down the record shop. And I remember there was a lovely chap who worked in there. I wanted to buy Ronnie Thunders, and he was going, this isn't for you. You don't want this, because he knew I liked the Beatles and stuff. He used to have secondhand records, and I'd buy secondhand Beatles records or something. But yeah, I bought that Chinese Rocks and stuff.
Right.
And then because you start reading the NME and that, and so I bought all the Clash and the Jam and everything, and then really just listening to John Peel was into things like Susie and the Banshees and everything. And
where did you grow up, by the way? Where was your hometown?
Well, I'm still there, Hertford.
Hertford, right?
It's in Hertfordshire, it's sort of near. I suppose the big towns around it, like Stevenage and Harlow, but it was a county town, and it's much more a commuter town then. You know, people 2 train stations going to London, sort of, 45 minutes into London, and so that was kind of handy for going to gigs and stuff. So I was lucky and managed to go to sort of Clash a lot of times, and used to go down the Lyceum a lot, and there were some great gigs down there.
My God, you had a really good musical education here, didn't you? Because I was
lucky
at the countryside, and sort of punk. I was a bit younger than you by a few years, but I didn't sort of feel like punk was ever going to reach us. It was kind of a heavy metal kind of world, really. It was metal and dead.
I got very frustrated because I knew that Susan and the Banshees played somewhere in Stevenage, and then they played in Bishop Stortford, both at kind of, you can't get there, and I'd have been too young probably to get in and stuff. So, that was really early on. And but then we did start going when I guess we technically wouldn't have been old enough, but it wasn't a problem. Then you didn't have to have IDs, So we'd but then very quickly, and so 1978 was really my favourite kind of, and then we sort of really got into bands like, the Swell Maps and the Television Personalities they kind of changed everything, and
Right.
they were my sort of, well, they weren't heroes because you didn't think of it like that, but they definitely inspired. And then we sort of tried to get hold of Woolworths guitars, and they had no idea what we were doing, and started making racket ourselves, just like, and by that 1980, I persuaded the local record shop to give us some money. Because they had a lot of those indie records in there, and then people would go in there, and so you'd meet each other in the record shop. And then I worked in there, but and so the first thing we did was a little kind of local compilation cassette, and everybody was into cassettes and stuff, and I love all that, still did. And then that kind of carried on. Have you had Paul on your show from Bi-Jooopiter?
No.
Paul Rixon, Paul McTells, but so later there was sort of quite that whole cassette culture thing, but after we did that compilation cassette with local bands, we did a vinyl LP, and I got the local record shop to press it, and I got the Cartel to stock it, and John Peel played it, and it was all so easy. You'd go and bump into John Peel and give him a record, and then he'd play it on the radio, and it was all brilliant, and yeah, and then it was around that time as well. There was a college in town that had become a kind of an annex of Hatfield Polytechnic, and which is Hertfordshire University now. And there isn't any annex in Hertford anymore. But there was, it had been a teacher training college. I had a student union there, and I don't know how I, blagged it, but I went in there and I was persuading them to put on, some gigs, and so I kind of, because I used to go and see a lot of gigs, like, so maybe I was talking to Delta 5 or something at the Moonlight Club, and so how do you book, things? And I said, oh yeah, our agent is Rough Trade.
Right.
So, and then I was saying, oh, that's interesting. And then I rang them up, and they were saying, I said, oh, who do you can have anyone? I said, what? I can have a television personalities. And they're going, yeah. So I got television personalities to come and play in Hertford. I put them on a couple of times, and that's when I met Dan.
Right.
And I put them on with the Marine Girls for 50p, and it wasn't even 250. And it was a fundraiser for a local community kind of alternative press thing, and that was great. And it seemed sort of like you could just do things then, and it was quite easy. But I think it's because they had a hall and a PA, and so they just kind of let me do it, which...
God, that's so handy. So that cassette that you were involved with, was that called the Tempest Tapes?
Oh, they came later, yeah. The first one we did was a cassette called An Evening with Rupert. And there's... The funny thing is, I don't know, I'm kind of... It's very kind of democratic, and I just sort of put everybody on it, whereas really, probably it would have been better to be more curated and just have, the things you liked on it. But so I'm sure I'm not, which I was going to say, not in any way, I'm not saying, I don't think any of them will be hearing this podcast, but I don't mean anything unkind. But I mean, like, we had, kind of rock bands and things on there, but there was enough interesting stuff. So on that cassette, that first cassette, the Marine Girls were on it, and that was when it was just Tracy and Gina. So that was before Jane joined, and then after that, her sister Alice joined as well. And I remember, I borrowed, like, there was a group that are really great, and I think they're doing festivals this week or next week, called Portion Control, who were a kind of electronic band. But they were from Ware, or John was, and they had a little drum machine. So I think there's a drum machine. Well, I know there is, but I haven't heard it for a long time because I've lost all the tapes. But there was a song that the Marine Girls did, and it had a little drum machine on.
Right. And, my God, you were right there on the musical zeitgeist of indie pop, really, weren't you?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Well, it just seemed so kind of, yeah. And it was then, so and then we did the LP, and there was a friend of mine who knew someone had a tape recorder, so that's how I kind of got to know Pat. So he had this sort of 8-track, and then we had to find somewhere to go and record it, and there was a place called Big Swell House where it was this art kind of stuff and hippies lived, and that was Lowell Coxall lived there, so I went to see Lowell Coxall.
Lowell Coxall, yeah, the jazz guy.
Yeah, saxophonist. And so I went to see him and I said, "Can we use your basement to do a recording?" He said, "Yeah, okay, as long as my son's group can be on it." And they were kind of Welling Garden City punk group. I said, "Yeah, of course." So it was a bit crazy, really. We just had for a weekend, and we had to kind of arrange for all the bands to go in there for an hour and do their song, and then another band come in, and we that's how we recorded that LP. And there was someone that had a really weird old video recorder that had a reel-to-reel thing, so someone videoed it, and I did later see it, and there's this video of the Marine Girls doing it in all really kind of funny black and white, but I've never seen that since. But
right, my God, that's so because it's kind of interesting that time, because I think there was a lot of kind of these little community art centre type places. I mean, obviously Norwich had the art centre. That was a disused church that I was told they could sort of have for £1 and just take it over. But obviously, they had to then sort of fix it up. But it was like the church were just like, yes, because have the art. But there were a lot of those little places that do workshops and screen print, and there was always a photography course, and just kind of a place where people and a bit of acting as well, and a bit of crafts and pottery. It was kind of quite nice, and and
there were often the places that would have had a photocopier, and that's where you could get your fanzines.
Yes, and definitely the darkroom bit as well. There was a lot of aspiring photographers at that time, and I just wish people had documented some of those, because they kind of only lasted probably a few years. There was always things like, there was a scheme called the scrap box, which was just to do with where people from companies or organisations would just kind of dump stuff that they didn't want, rather than landfill, would just put it into this place called scrap box, and then creative types would go along and try and make something nice or interesting from it, or put on events, wouldn't they? There was a lot of, because the Lowell Cox I came across, because he used to perform at something called the Barsham Fairs, which were these hippie fairs in the 70s and 80s in East Anglia, and he used to appear with people like there's that guitarist who was a gynecologist as a doctor. Oh God, I can't remember his
was it Hank
Wangford, because he got the name Wangford because there's a village near the coast called Wangford. Yes. God, interesting facts. No one's going to understand a clue what we're talking about here now. But it all kind of ties up, doesn't it? I think you need those places for people to perform to almost get a bit of an attraction to start going to the next level. But you need to sort of get out there and do a few things. And those East Anglian fairs led a lot of sort of clowns and performing theatre companies kind of almost think, let's just pretend we can do this and then get away with it, and then think, actually we'll make a career instead.
Well, I think obviously the people that are good do kind of come out of it and are successful, but I think also that just being able to do it in a small way that's all that it needed to be, because we do little things in villages and stuff with these local bands, and it wasn't like covers bands, which is what it's gone back to now, and what it had been. If you ever saw a band in the pub back then, before punk, it would be just people doing, kind of covers of Genesis or something. But when you're just playing in a village hall, and maybe it's not kind of full, but it's other kids, it's understood it's actually meant to be like that. You're not trying to sort of, and like maybe it's not as, I mean, everyone can have dreams, but you kind of, you're just doing it yourself rather than going and paying £100 to watch Oasis. You're watching a local band in a little church hall. It's not like every little band is trying to get to be Oasis. So it kind of it exists for its own.
Yes.
It's valid in itself. It doesn't.
I think with a lot of people, they thought, God, if we can just get a record played on John Peel, we can then retire and sort of move on. But there was a lot of bands who I think there was no, I mean, especially the 80s, I don't think there was any career progression, because I think for a lot of people, especially the left of centre types, there was a lot of unemployment, and there wasn't many kind of it felt like opportunities at the time, and it was a little bit grim on the political front as the decade rolled on, and we had all those kind of grim moments with the Falkland War and the miners' strike and Greenham Commons. So, and then there was huge unemployment. So there was a lot of bands who used the unemployment system and job seekers allowance and enterprise allowance schemes to fund a lifestyle which required going to the pub on happy hour for a few moments just to sort of get cheap beer and then go to the chippy. And
to jump ahead a bit, that's exactly what I did. Because I was talking to Alan McGee, like when he'd done Creation, and so I did a label called Frank, and so I did that for a year on Enterprise Allowance Scheme, and got the princely sum of £40 a week, and but again, that just seemed to just work. Like sort of, I had to get a manufacturing distribution deal with the cartel kind of people, and so we did 40 Nice Bears, and just went and gave it to John Peel, and then he played it, and then it was, and then we did a session, and that was, because that's what you were just when we were talking earlier, you were saying about it's just come out on Precious recording or whatever. I think it always confused sort of the BBC a little bit, because it was a bit crafty. I put my name down because I kind of was never their manager, but they're just so disorganised. Someone had to be the grown up, but so I added my name to it, so I got paid as well.
God, that would have been. You were there,
but I didn't do any music on it. But I got whatever 45 quid it was, and so it was. It's a shame. I don't know whether you get whatever. It wouldn't be any equivalent to that now. But enterprise allowance scheme.
I know, unfortunately.
Some people obviously it worked for Alan, didn't it? He kind of got a bit more successful.
Well, yes, it took a while, but I don't think without it, the story wouldn't have gone where it did without, because you got housing benefit and council tax paid, and you got your 40 quid. So actually it was like you were, and I don't think anyone had put central heating on during those days. You went to the Army Navy place and sort of just made sure you just walked around with those big boots and lots of clothes on, didn't you, for 6 months of the year? In dark rooms, smoking. It was all very rock and roll. So, how did your musical career then? You left school, I guess, when you were 16.
No. I was 18 because I stayed on and didn't do any A levels. Well, I did one,
right?
And then I was, I was a postman for a bit and stuff. But when we, I was just more interested in. Punk rock than sort of getting a job. But we got these little Woolworths guitars, and there was another lad in the shop, John, and we started trying to do a little group and stuff. That was about 79 and that. And actually I saw Paul and McTells, we've been getting together doing stuff, and we did a couple of days ago. But I sort of never wanted to do any of the old stuff. I just said what was fun was making things up. So we were making new stuff up. And I was just talking to Paul, and it was in June 1980 that he first. I was in a little group, and our singer sort of was either too shy or didn't want to do it. And Paul came and sang with our group in the Hertford Heath Village Hall, and I sort of did a hand-drawn poster, which I still got. So I know it was in June 1980. So it must, and we did versions of ATV songs and some of our own and things like that. So we did that for a little bit, and then my sort of group with a few different people were on that cassette, and then that LP, which was an evening with Rupert, and then the Rupert preaching at a picnic, which is one we recorded in that Jigsaw house with Pat, and then Paul's involved as well. We did a couple of other cassettes called The Tempest, which were kind of meant to be every month, and like a little magazine, but on a cassette, and they were just local bands. And again, we included like everybody, so there was some sort of punk bands and some hippies and all the rest of it. And so by that time, that first group, which had been called the Elusive Diplomats, had kind of finished. But then, although that was John and me, and then John started another group, and he asked me to play with that, and that was called Jerry and the Chairs, and that was with Gina singing, who'd been in the Marine Girls, Gina.
Right.
And I think you might have had Gina on your feed.
Yes.
I don't know. And that only lasted about 3 weeks, but we did this little cassette recording thing. And then, so then we carried on with that without John, who'd started it, and it was called Moscovite 5. And there was like, there was 5 of us in that. And, but it was all very scrappy and stuff. And we were only around, did that for 2 months. It was Andy Wilson, who was about 14, his sister Sarah, and I'm going to...
you had Madeline on saxophone.
Yes, right. Madeline, yeah.
And you were on bass.
Sure, that's right. And it's there was some fun bits in it, but it's not all brilliant. And then because it's so scarce, that's sometimes like I see it on Discogs for lots of money, and I just think, I wish it wasn't. But I might still do a little compilation of some of all this old stuff and put it on Bandcamp, and maybe, for free and stuff. And so that if anyone's curious, they can hear it. But I might edit out some of the things I think aren't so good, because you're allowed to, aren't you?
Well, yes.
And we so that was on In Phase, which was Pat started doing cassettes, and he did the Marine Girls and Boner Dish and Portion Control. And I used to do things with other friend Bill. We were called Magic Kites or CF Kites, and we did recording with him, but we never actually did a cassette. And that was all around 81-ish, 81, 82. And then, like I said, I badgered these people to put gigs on, so I'd met Dan, and then it was just, you just get talking, and then it was a really nice chat. We were like friendly. And so I used to go and see him a lot, and then used to hang around with him and see all the gigs that CVPs were doing when it was with the classic kind of lineup that did all the first LPs, which was Dan, Ed, and Empire. And it was Mark Shepherd, everyone calls him now, but everyone called him Empire. And then, and we occasionally, we played in Hertford, played with him and stuff. And then Ed left to do more of the times. And Dan asked me to play with him, which was a ridiculous thing, really, because I wasn't good enough. And but of course you had to do it. And so I played with, I think the first one we did was under the Savoy Hotel as a dive bar in late 82.
Right. And this is a track called A Sense of Belonging.
Yeah. Yeah, that was and then some of that was on, so that was the single. And actually, bizarrely, I was at home in the bedroom, and there was I had the radio cassette thing, and the Radio 1 was on, and they had that whatever it was, not a jukebox jury, but a kind of a record review thing where they're playing records.
Yes.
And they had and they played A Sense of Belonging. So I pressed play and record, and it was Morrissey and Paul Weller reviewing it.
Oh, nice.
And I shared that with Keg on his sort of TVP's website, which I think is down now. But then I think various bits of it got taken from there and put on a CD, maybe One Damaged Goods did. But yeah, it was really funny because Morrissey, because that was on Rough Trade, and Morrissey was all going, it's a bit tricky because people didn't like the cover, which had a bashed face of a little girl that had been beaten up, which of course is a pretty horrific picture. And it's all about, the 3-minute warning and nuclear war. And then, it was a funny, the it was Richard Skinner, wasn't it? He was going, "Oh yeah, like heavy stuff," and then Paul Weller was going, "We'll serve you about it," or something, and then he says, and he said, "Well," he said, he didn't like it, you know. But I think there was always a little bit of animosity between some of the Creation, Alan McGee people, and kind of the Paul Weller legacy stuff. I think they did do something once where he put custard pie in his face or something. I don't know, but
right.
I don't have anything to do with that. But I mean,
yes.
yeah. But yeah, no. So that was kind of the weird thing when before the internet and stuff. I could never remember when it was I was in the TVPs because it was it kind of covered a. I think it was sort of like at the end of it. I now know, sort of like autumn '82, and then '83, and then a bit into '84, and so so the first quite a few gigs I did with me, Empire, and Dan, and did quite a few of those, and then it was including the ones which said that it was the last ever TVP's gig, although it was just something. He's always making things up, and but then eventually Empire did go, and then we did a few things with various different drummers, and but yeah, no, the one that there was something just on a TVP's appreciation thing recently, which was a photo the London Musicians Collective, that was still with Empire, and oh yeah, and we did one at when I had my tape recorder and I recorded it, and that's some of that cassette was used on the very first Creation, like the flexi disc in Communication with Blur, which has got the logo and it's called Creation Artifact 001, and like one of the live tracks was from the cassette I made there, which and that was given away in Communication Blur. And so yeah, there was another letter I shared with Keg's website. Is funny. It's like Dan, because we used to, but people didn't really have phones necessarily, so people did write letters.
It was always the old for going to phone boxes and around, and yes,
well, he was
through the pages.
And so he's this letter saying, "Oh, that chap Alan's saying about doing stuff," and so that was just when he first met Alan, and then in a way we kind of played an awful lot at his
the living room.
The living room, yeah.
So you played it. What was it like, the living room?
It was brilliant. I mean, it was really small. It was just like it was above the Adams Arms, which was right next to the post office tower. And it was just like the room upstairs from a pub, which is, it might have had a table in, and you could only get, it'd be pretty packed if you had 50 people in there, I think. But I mean, and we played there an awful lot. And
what was Dan like in those days? Because he was running Wham Records at that stage, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I remember, because I used to sort of hang around with, just even before I joined it, I remember, being in his flat, and where he lived with his mum and dad, in the King's Road, and there'd been a phone call from Stephen because he was putting out that Songs for Children, that first Pastels record, and
oh yes,
I mean, he did get things done, but he was very kind of chaotic, but ramshackle and stuff, and not the most sort of driven, hard-nosed sort of record company executive.
Yes, quite. Because I did an interview with a guy from the 1000 Violins from Sheffield, and they seem to sort of have a few records on Wham and stayed at Dan's place, but it sounded like they used to have to shout through the door where he was in his bedroom to sort of ask him things, and it sounded like a very peculiar kind of...
would. Yes, I mean, definitely. I always got on well with Dan, but I mean, yeah, I guess if he hadn't done anything and it kind of avoid things, and I think he probably wouldn't necessarily sort of turn up with the money to pay for something that needed paying for, and that kind of thing. I don't know what they're maybe, but yeah, I mean, it was, all the stuff I did, it was just, it was his records. So, I wasn't
Yes. And was
particularly
it
involved in
fun?
it.
Was it fun playing live with the band?
It was. I mean, I think we had one practice once, but we never practiced. And I'm maybe marginally better now, but I was not a natural kind of musician, having never really known what I'm doing. And I mean, there was plenty of other people like that, but so we used to just kind of make it up as it went along, which usually was great. But I don't know whether that was one of the reasons that Empire got fed up. But I mean, it was even like that. So we do gigs and like it would go, oh, this is Fred, who's oh, Fred, he's playing drums, he never even met him, but it all kind of worked out, and
Yes.
that was in the Adams Arms, and when we were kind of, um, and then Dave and Joe kind of came back on, and so the thing is, we recorded that Painted Word LP in Battersea. I think it was Battersea. It was near Clapham Junction, and sometimes it just say, "Oh, this is A minor," and he'd just sort of start playing a riff, and I just had to make something up on the spot. And that's my recollection is what Painted Word the song was. He just went ding 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 ding, and it just like and that's it. And that was the record. So it was kind of sounds as though it's jazz or something, but but with people that can't play.
Yes. And
I mean, Dan's a great musician, actually.
Yes. And did Empire ever come back to the band?
No. I mean, that's what you're saying. When you're saying Sense of Belonging, he recorded that a bit earlier, but I hadn't been there. So I put the bass on later in the control room on a left-handed bass upside down and was being fed tea and biscuits as I was playing. And that's the thing that's on the record, and it's sort of all a bit kind of crazy, really.
Yes, well, it's definitely a sort of indie sort of free-flowing jazz odyssey, really, wasn't it?
Yes. And then everyone seemed to really like it. But I think that's obviously, Dan's songs. I mean, I was a big fan, still am, of all his things.
Yes. And then
very natural.
What was that?
I say he's very natural, the way he just kind of came up with stuff. I mean, I don't know any writer, you have to make it up, but he would just seem to just do it. He wasn't spent ages sort of writing it and editing it and stuff. He just kind of just happened, and they're usually brilliant.
Well, that's amazing. And then what was your next musical kind of adventure as the 80s trucked on towards 85?
Well, it all got a bit kind of, kind of got crazy after this Italian thing. And then I had we did this gig in Italy, and so I went on with, people had gone on ahead, and I went with Dan and Joe, but they didn't know where they were going. So I was thinking, how you just, and then there was this train strike in France, so we had to sleep the night on the station in Paris, which the people let us do. But then for some reason they open the doors to the waiting room, and all the tramps come in, and then they boot us off. They wake us up when we're sleeping on the benches, and then we eventually had to get these slow trains down, and we got to Milan, and then we got to Venice, and we were looking around, and we saw this poster for this gig, and it had an address on it. We went to this place in Venice. It was a record shop, and they didn't speak English particularly. And we were pointing at this, and no, we're just selling the tickets. But eventually they said, oh yeah, no, it's in Padua. And so how'd you get there? So we got on a bus, and we went. But it was just chaos. And then we realised we'd got there on forged tickets. But the gig was brilliant because it was just, I was so frazzled and stuff. And it was in this nightclub and had all these lights going on under the floor. And we were really did a great kind of Velvet Underground kind of, really drony, manic, and it was brilliant. But it was just, and I realised when the promoter, we went back to his house and the others had cleared off to some party or whatever, and we were climbing in through the window to his house. I was thinking, that's not the normal way to get into a house. And they were all totally shady and stuff. And I didn't realise we didn't have a ticket back. So he just got this sort of book out, which had obviously been nicked from some travel agent, and wrote us out. He said, do you want to go to Naples? I said, no, London's good, thanks. So he just got this ticket back to London. And he realised they were we're not forged, they were run, but they were kind of hadn't been paid for and stuff. But anyway, we got that. And but then I'd started being a postman, and I was getting up really early and working late, and all the split shift stuff. It just all got too much. Just the chaos, So to answer your question, I think I kind of stopped doing stuff a little bit. And I went to Brighton. I still sort of, that was in about 1985. I went to Brighton. And actually, I played with the TVPs down in Brighton. Joe and David left again, and when they played in Brighton, I sort of sauntered along with a guitar I couldn't play and joined in when they played in Brighton. So I kept in touch with Dan. We would see him all the time. And later, when he was doing stuff on Vinyl Japan, recording at Toe Rag, I played some drums on one of the singles he did in the 90s, late 90s. But I think it must have been like realising like how Alan had done that, creation, and like talking to him, that I was living in Brighton. I had this kind of what did they used to? They used to have something else, like some scheme, and I was working, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll do a record label. But I just went out to see the 49 Bears in Falmouth, which was the university, and they were on a Monday night, third on the bill, and I thought, oh, I like them. And so I started doing that record label, and then so I did the 49 Bears record, and Peel played it. Oh, this is good. And I always kept in touch with people that had been in Hertford in bands that were a bit younger than me, and Paul had carried on doing these cassettes. He'd moved to London then, but there was a band I really liked called the Scarlet Sunshine, and that had a nucleus of Stuart and Bill, the bass and guitar, and I played with a chap called David, who was the singer of Scarlet Sunshine. But then David did a band called Emile, and I played in that as well. And we did a cassette. That came after that. But so Stuart and Bill then hooked up with Paul, and they were doing something. They had lots of different names. They were called like the Elliot Mess for a while.
Right.
And then they did this thing, and they had this cassette, and it was called the McTells. But I don't think it actually quite come out as a cassette. But I said to them, let's do a record, because I'm doing this little record label now. And they said, we haven't got a drummer. And they kind of stopped doing it. And I said, well, don't worry about it, I'll do that. And so I, did the old, just having the floor tom and the snare and stand up sort of drumming sort of thing. And we recorded the first did some recording. And then that's eventually how I ended up being their drummer. And that went on for ages.
Yes, the Tales.
We did a flexi, which Peel played. I don't think he played anything after that. And did a few singles and EPs. Mostly they were EPs. And I put one out on that Frank label.
Yes.
And then we did a couple of LPs. And then we went, played in Germany and Belgium and quite a bit around the UK. And then we went to America, and we met Calvin, because we got, it was kind of through, we'd always known the legend, Everett True or Jerry.
Yes.
I always like calling him the legend. And he we were really lucky with the McTells as well. We got to meet the Clean. We played Clean, and then we hung out with them and went for a curry the next day and stuff. And so I still stayed friends with Hamish like throughout his life, and later, we'd go to America and see him. And Hamish Kilgore, yeah.
Yes.
So the McTells played with the Clean, and we used to play in the Falcon an awful lot. And we started off. That was the first little gig. I think the Legend reviewed. It was at the Black Horse, which was before it had moved around across the square to the Falcon. And we played with the Happy Mondays, and I don't know whether it was. Might be getting it wrong. Might be the Jasmine Minks.
Right.
But Jerry didn't even mention the Jasmine Minks. He just reviewed the McTells and Happy Mondays, saying, "Oh, this is the future. They're going to change the world." Because he liked us for some reason. Don't know why, but he was kind of half right with the Happy Mondays anyway. And so we did. So when we went to America and met Calvin, and because he had this whole set culture, and there's a lot of people there were aware of all these obscure cassettes we'd done, like the Meal and things, and so we did gigs with a sub pop band called Seaweed, and they really.
Oh God, I love Seaweed. They did an amazing cover of the Fleetwood Mac song "Go Your Own Way."
Did that?
I think they were on a film they were on a soundtrack called Clerks, which was one of those cult movies.
Oh yeah.
So
but they were really nice, and I was having to say to them, "There's just no way we could play with you in London, though, because like it wouldn't be allowed, because like they like that kind of range of things, but and they liked all the left field and like the kind of rubbish that we were doing." I was saying, "I know, they're not as broad-minded in London. You'd have to play with other grungy groups." So that was great, and we went to Germany a few times, but I think I really like Vinyl Japan. We did a record for, which I really liked, which was our last record. But then I kind of thought, "Oh, we've done this enough," and I said, "Let's stop." And I felt a bit guilty because it was something for them. And then they formed Gilroy, and Will came back into that, and with Kathy from Heavenly. And then I played as well. So it was the same thing. But so
was it still called the McTells?
No, Gilroy.
Oh.
So it was a totally different group that had the same people. So we did a couple of records, which I think are really good fun if you can never dig them out. There's one called Renaissance Girl, and that went on for a bit. But then I left that as well.
Right.
But, I'd started playing with other old friends that had been to school.
Just going back, so the McTells had quite a long period of time. You were nearly 10 years together, weren't you?
Well, I guess it was 86 to 90. I thought it was about 92, but you said that thing that said 94. But
yeah,
I'd say it was 92.
Smash Up looked like 94.
Was it? Oh, right, there you go.
So you had the first album, which was self-titled, then Expecting Joe, Cut Up, and then Smash Up.
Yeah.
So did you, in that time, did the band get, sell more, go to, have bigger crowds? How did the lifestyle of the band go?
I think we were lucky that we got a little bit of attention early on, just because, probably due to the legend. But when he was working at the NME, he did a little piece. So we did have one of those tiny little pictures and a little bit of blurb in the NME early on. And but unfortunately, I think the record that would have been around at that time, I think, was pretty weak. But then I think, so when we would be playing all these little places like everybody else around the country, and there'd be those little venues, and I don't know what the crowds would be like. It'd be good if it was 100, wouldn't it? And stuff.
Yes.
But we never played anywhere bigger than those small places, apart from when we would play with the Pastels or something, because I got to know Stephen quite well. Because I made that film with the Pastels in '86 as well.
What was that called?
Yeah, I can't.
Oh, I'll have to have a look.
It was it was sort of, we made quite a did it on Super 8, and it was around the time of their,
truck train driving.
Truck train tractor and all that. Yeah.
Yes, that was a classic indie period, wasn't it? So was it kind of, because the McTells at that stage, you would have been almost there for the world of indie pop, really, wouldn't you? It would have been almost like, not indie pop, for Brit pop.
That's right. Yeah, and then was a bit later as well when we were doing. We kind of got friendly with Heavenly and people.
So when the McTells finished in, say, 93, 94, what was your next band at that stage?
I guess some of them crossed over. There was CB Beaumont, which is I played guitar in that, and it was 2 guitars and drums. And Chef Butch is also Bill Will from the very early McTells, and then Gilroy, and now he's in the McTells again. Now he played drums, and it was me and Owen who was King Zero, giving all the secrets away.
Yes.
So, and we did did quite a few records, and
you did 2 on Damaged Goods albums, didn't you?
Yes.
Pre-Stress and No Introduction Needed. So that was during that period. And then, did you say you worked with a member of Amelia in your? What was your next band after CB?
Again, they kind of crossed over a bit. There was Sportique, which was Greg Webster, who was in the Razor Cuts, and then it started off with just the 2 of us as a kind of like a male Lois, if you remember Lois. But he was just like, he played his 12-string and I bashed away. He asked me to bash some drums, which was all very primitive. And then Rob came in and played bass, and it got a lot more melodic and really good. And we did the first kind of record with the 3-piece, and then Amelia joined and Ian and played the keyboard, because when we recorded, we put bits of keyboard on the first ones. And so then we were a 4-piece for the next 2 kind of 10 inches, if you want to call them LPs. And that goes into early 2000s then, doesn't it?
So was that the first, or was that the only member of the Heavenly you've worked with, Amelia?
Well, and Rob.
And Rob, yeah, Percy, yeah. So that was Sportique.
And then, but the Gilroy had been Kathy Rogers.
Kathy. So what was that band? God, I'm confused.
That was Gilroy.
Gilroy, right.
And that was because, like, some of the songs, like, different people writing different songs, but she wrote songs. But of course, it was like Heavenly was Amelia's songs, so she was doing her songs with, and Paul would do songs, and the odd thing. So yeah.
Yes, that was always very. God, I know there's a lot of indie crossover here, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's Kathy, right? And did you ever meet Dan's girlfriend, who was in a band called, something called? It's a bit like the Incredible String Band, Beautiful Daughter, or something like that. Did you ever meet?
England's Beautiful Daughter.
Yes.
Well, I would have seen them, yeah, and I think they did when he was living in Poinders Court. But I didn't particularly know her, I don't think, no.
Because they used to sort of play at this place called, was it the Fire Station?
Yeah.
Did you ever play there?
No, because that would have been after I'd left the TVP fold as such, although, yeah, I stayed in touch with Dan, but I never did. I don't know why I never went there. Must have been too busy doing my own things. But, yeah, I know other people that went there, and I never did.
Yes, my God. And so that's quite a more of a sophisticated pop sound, isn't it, this one that you did with Amelia, Greg and Rob? Yeah,
well, it was a bit later, but we did 3 sessions for John Peel as well, which was nice, because we never got any attention because, of course, we were old gits. And but, like, that's the good thing about John Peel. He just played things he liked, didn't he? He didn't care about it being fashionable. And, yeah, I think, it was quite... I think it was almost like things had gone back to being, with some of those other labels, like, where it's at is where you are, put the stuff out. And then Matinee in America. And we were all friends with Sean in Fortuna Pop. And so I think there were a lot of those labels and lots of other groups doing a bit more kind of twee stuff again by then. Although we were, I suppose, in a funny way, a bit rocky in a way, but I think a bit punky, and but a bit twee as well. Have you ever heard any of the Sportiques, that then?
Yes, I had a play before, yes, earlier, and thought, God, this is a very nice sound. And it was during that period of the late 90s, wasn't it? The New Labour years.
Yeah.
I'm surprised it didn't sort of get more traction, really. But like you said, you did 2 sessions, one in 99 and one in 2001. So did you play live much?
Yeah, and we went to America a couple of times as well. But and to Munich again. I think. But yeah, just those sort of fairly small places around London, um, and yeah, again, it's not as if it was done fairly cheaply and all the rest of it, but we did the last couple of records. Definitely the last, maybe the last two we did at Toe Rag again. That's why it's got a nice sound. But
Yes.
it's all done on a kind of a budget and small labels and stuff. So, I
So
think
the work you
it
did
was
with
quite
your
popular.
German band around that time, was it Bartleby's?
Yeah, that was a lot earlier, really. Yeah, yeah.
Right. Was that as a producer or were you playing on them?
I might have added an unnecessary overdub of guitar on something, but yeah, no, I was, and really, I mean, you say producer, it's so funny, but like, I was just encouraging brilliant the singer Patrick. I was thinking, oh, that guitar don't sound good, and I was saying, oh, why aren't you using a plectrum? And it was some stylistic kind of choice, and he goes, I always lose them, in his German accent, so I said, well, here you go, use this one, and it will sound a little bit better. And so,
Right.
I think it was just that they didn't, because they knew me and they were going in the studio, and they didn't know um, what was what it was all about, and they just had a little bit of uh, extra. Um, Hold on, it's a bit shouted at. Can I hit the pause for a sec?
Oh gosh, yes. Don't get shouted by your fans. Oh, how do I end? I don't want to end. Do I want to pause it?
I'm busy.
Oh, pause.
Yeah, no, I'm filming an interview.
Holding back. Is that? Yeah. So you had a bit more kind of. Well, you'd had 2 decades in music by then, so I guess you would have had a lot more experience in recording techniques and yes, creating sort of an ambience in a studio. And also, you worked with Mike Engels from the BBC, the Maida Vale sessions with John Peel. So you'd have.
Yeah.
And was
Well,
and
we
did
didn't
you
really work.
and during that time did your playing? Did you used to practice a lot, and did you feel like your playing as a musician had sort of developed and come on in leaps and bounds?
Uh, that all sounds very complimentary, but no, not really. I mean, you can't get any worse, I suppose. But it's funny when you're saying about. I do remember with the Ice Bears recording at Maida Vale, it was Dale Griffin or Griffiths or whatever. Is it Griffin or Griffiths, the Mott the Hoogle drummer guy that did all
Yes,
the, and he was like really mean to them,
he
and
was
like
mean when he.
um they the first thing he said was you can make a lot of enemies with a drum kit like that, and all this sort of stuff, like putting them at their ease. So, I mean, that was possibly one of the reasons, like Rob was, I was invited along as well, uh, but I always remember, like with that other guy you said, all he was doing was like going on about how he'd recorded Blur and how he thought the session was better than the one that was in the chart and stuff. And it was, and like so they did the first sort of mix of something we did that was with Subi Beaumont, and we all went, "Blur." We didn't like it, and but now and then they did change it, when we listen back, like the Subi Beaumont session actually does sound better now. But like when you're younger, you want it all to be really kind of trashy or something, and really yeah. With the years, you kind. But I always have very strong ideas how I like things to sound very simple and kind of classic and not kind of overproduced. I mean, we were unfortunate that we kind of in the 80s. I think some of the indie pop stuff kind of suffers from it. Like the drums are too loud and they got too much. All of this, everyone was mad keen on the snare effects and all of that. You know, gating and like artificiality, and rather it, I think drums should sound like like Ringo, but like I think in the 80s there was a lot more, I mean,
well,
that's why I like the shop
yeah.
for example, like there's a guitar and it's loud and it's fuzzy, or and the Mary Chain, or and Primal Scream when they were the Jingle Jangle, the guitars are very prominent. I think, like sometimes when records are mixed, it's sort of like you can't actually hear anything, And then also sometimes in the 80s, with the indie pop stuff, people would have the vocals too low, and I think, oh no, you got to,
yes,
turn them up a bit. So, but yeah.
So then, what happened after your time with Rob, Amelia, and Greg, and because that went on until about 2003, didn't it?
Yeah, and by which time I belatedly had a daughter, children, and so moved back out into Hertford where I was still working, and I suppose working and children, and then I've always been messing around with music. So Gina and I have always done music. I haven't mentioned that yet. But, we did a cassette after we did that Moscovite 5 thing. We did something on a little compilation, and we were called Cindy Arthur. We were sort of like got little cassettes which we've never done anything with, and songs. And then we started doing. We did do a cassette, didn't we, of Cindy Arthur? Yeah, on Bi-Joopiter and kind of Frank. And then when I moved back out here, we get together, and I've been experimenting with different things, using little toy instruments and Game Boy nano loop things, and we've been doing recordings and not putting them out, and that's my thing for this year to just.
So are you still working with Gina then?
Yeah. Yeah, we had a cup of tea last week, and we've set ourselves a deadline of September to sort of put something together. So each time we do something, I always kind of rewrite all the music, which I think gets on the nerves. But I just kind of don't want to repeat things, and so I've got to pull my finger out and do something with that. And I kind of do all the music, so I really enjoy that. And then I can get stroppy with myself and not have to worry about it, But
yes, my God, that's fantastic.
I've been playing with just some local bands a bit around here. There's that great group, Looking Glass Alice. I did one set with them, which is all like real garage rock stuff. And over the years, like the McTells got back together a couple of times and did stuff at the Hertford Museum, and we did something at that Indie Tracks.
Right.
Fenestration. So Gina and I we call ourselves the Fenestration, and we did an Indie Tracks, but that was probably about 12 years ago. And then CB Beaumont have occasionally done the odd thing, and we did something in the Ramsgate Music Hall a while ago, and we've played in London a few times, and we went to Mallorca and did one of those wild weekend things, and everyone said it was like the best we'd ever played. And I think in our maturity, we didn't make such a bad job of it.
Yes.
And more recently, the McTells, we used to get together for a Christmas drink, and because of COVID, it had been about 5 years, and someone was saying, "Oh, why don't we get together and do have a play around?" And I said, I don't really want to do that, because now you're getting older. I don't want to play those songs that weren't that popular 30 years ago.
Yes.
And I said, but what was fun is, when you get together and you make stuff up in the room, and so we did that, and we did that over 3 sessions, and then we just went into Gizzard in London and recorded a whole new LP, and we did a couple of gigs and with some friends in a high span are really good. Have you had Kevin on your program? Kevin Younger?
No, Kevin Younger.
Yeah.
So who was he in?
He's been in loads of things, but he would have been around in in C86 era. What band would he have been in there? I mean, he was more in kind of like that head coaty kind of Chatham kind of thing. But he would definitely know all the people like the dentists and things like that.
Right.
You know, the dentists.
Yes. Yeah, yes. That I had was it a beautiful dream or something like that? That was just an amazing, sort of classic song. I've done a few. So
There was a band called The Claim as well.
The Claim, yes. That was part of that little scene, wasn't the Medway scene, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, that's where he's from. But since then, he's been in lots of different
So was he in
groups. And
Subway Sec?
That's it. Yeah, he was in Subway Sec, yeah.
Right, and then Armitage Shanks and Dirt Hole, Hand of Stabs, Planet of the Apes.
You've got a good memory.
So yes, that's Kevin Younger, right? So basically,
recently the Heist band, and they're great fun, and we did, share gigs with them, and then the McTells we did last year. We played in Bristol with Rob Percy's first band, and we did that at the Hope and Anchor and stuff. So we do the odd little thing.
Yes.
And then I'd been playing with some friends in Hertford doing a kind of reggae rock steady thing, which was great fun. I don't do that anymore.
Nice. God, this is how you need to spend your 60s, isn't it, really? Playing in bands. And it's interesting because I know with a lot of the more American bands, I think it's because of the geography of the place, but they were quite relaxed about sort of like not splitting up, but just going, well, two members had to leave and they just moved. So we then formed another band, and then we formed, there was especially like that K Records that you mentioned, Kelvin, didn't you? But I do sort of realise because with a lot of the indie bands, it was a bit like you have that tight unit, somebody leaves or they fall out, and that's the end of the band. Whereas it's almost like, because people are geographically quite close, whereas in America it's like, I think people just accept quite early on that someone's going to move away and you're going to have to either replace the member of a band or just get together with another group who'd also split up and get together. So they're not quite often so uptight, really.
Well, I guess it also helps if you're not, very successful and no one's interested, and so you just carry on to spite them. But no, I think also everything that I've done, we've always been friends, and then we started doing a group. It's not like, we put an advert on a music shop notice board, like saying, bass player wanted. We've always sort of known everybody that we do the music with. And so it just kind of, it's organically grown when you've got being friendly with someone and then realise that you both like something. Think, why don't we we do this? Which was what with CB Beaumont, like where we kind of wanted to explore, that style, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And have you managed to archive all your work? Because you've got a hell of a lot of work here, haven't you, from different periods? I mean, this is quite a life of sort of like creative.
Well, no, not really. I mean, I think it's interesting that like nothing's digital out there. So I was thinking, because I sort of did this, like that LP last year, Mix Up. Did you ever hear that Mix Up? It's on Bandcamp.
No.
That's the new McTells one, and I didn't promote it at all. And I was thinking of kind of compiling the bits that I like from the kind of the two lineups of the McTells, like the 4-piece and then 3-piece, because when Bill left to go to the art college and stuff, and just to put them out on Bandcamp and help kind of re-promote what we've just done.
Yes.
So that, in a sense, would be archiving, wouldn't it? And then some of that really early stuff that's sort of so, obscure. I was thinking it'd be nice to put that together. But I mean, whether you're, I suppose in some ways you're allowed to, but I wouldn't want to upset anyone by putting, the Marine Girls thing on there without, asking them if it was okay,
Yes,
so, those, because they're not on anything else, but and they're good. So that would that was in the back of my mind and some of the stuff that, Gina and I have been doing. It's one of the things we're saying. Let's just sort of maybe pull together all this stuff that's not seen the light of day for 25 years or something, and just put it out just so that it's there, but then, do something new. And I'm always wanting to experiment and do new things. But
yes.
Now I've kind of, I've retired, so we've got more opportunity now to.
So have you tried digitizing the sort of those cassettes and sort of?
Yeah. I've got bits on various digital things, but I mean, I kind of get a bit critical of it for being not that good. But I don't mind it if it's naff, but if it was sort of not very good quality and naff,
Yes, I guess that is tricky.
Yeah, no, I will do that, and I'll let you know if
sees the light of day. Yes, well, I think a few people have sort of just stuck stuff up, thinking, well, I'm not going to. Yeah, they just do it, don't they? And think, well, it's not going to sell more than a few copies, but yes, no one needs to know about it, and no one's going to get rich from it.
No, well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? No one. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's exactly right. But, so I was thinking, for the most part, you'd try and put it up for nothing. But I think if we might do a record with fenestration and try and sell that, like it'll be a record. But I mean, like the McTells last thing, we went into Gizzard to record it. And of course, that takes a bit of money. I mean, I suppose it's a hobby and you pay for stuff, but it'd be nice to sort of try and, write, if you put on a compilation and you could sell it for a couple of quid, maybe you'll get a few couples of quids that you get in might help fund something else,
Yes, and it's quite good. So the mix-up, this is the last McTells album. So is that, I mean, that came out as a cassette, but is that on any platform sites at all?
It's on Bandcamp.
It's on Bandcamp, right.
And so you can listen to it on there free, can't you? I'm a bit loath to put things on Spotify because I just think it's a bit naff, really, that you don't get paid, and well, people have to pay to listen to it, but it doesn't go to the musicians, does it?
No.
I mean, I'll put it on there if it was free, but because we're never going to get any money for it. But then people are paying to listen to it, which
yes,
it's
no.
And I think there are people that are a bit more with it than befuddled old me. I think Rob Percy's rails against Spotify, didn't he? We might not. I apologise if he.
Well, I think, but Amelia definitely does. So
right? Okay, yeah.
That's that we can say that, can't we, without any court action?
But yeah, no, I just yeah. I mean, but then again, you see a lot of people I know that they want to put their stuff out there so that it's out there and people can listen to it, and it's not really about. I mean, it's not about. I don't want to make money, but I don't. It's if there's explore alternatives.
Yes, I think Bandcamp is probably the better option then if you want to keep it as more of a pure sort of relationship thing with artist and audience. So there you go. So with the McTells then, so I was going to say, with the McTells then, is it an on-just-going project that you just, play with, occasionally when you're about and then sort of play the odd gig?
Well, it would always be something like someone will say, "Oh, well, let's get together," and then I think the next time we might reasonably be able to get in the same room again is November. So it's not like when we were younger, we used to sort of get together every week and we'd live in the same town, and no one, and it was it's so ongoing. I mean, it was just that actually we went to our friends at Hertford Museum last Christmas. They had a little Christmas drinks to thank everybody for helping in the year, and we went along. And we were invited because we played there with Ice Band, and Sarah, who runs the museums, said it was the most money they'd ever made because, they do a bar and they made loads of money. And said, "Would you do it again?" And so we said, "Oh, well, I suppose so." And we got the Ice Band back up. And I said to them again, "Well, let's make up some more songs then if we're going to do that." But we made up a couple of songs, and so this is just carrying on a bit more and just doing see what happens, throw a few ideas about, and make up new things, because that kind of the creation of and then recording of things is the fun bit.
Yes.
So I don't know. It's not as if you never say never, but it's not as though we're going to sort of go and start touring or doing. It will be no more than this. But I think that we're aiming at, and we might try and record it ourselves again, like we always used to, because we used to do it all home recording with a 4-track.
Yes.
Well, the early cassettes were like Expecting Joe, etc., and then we were in studios a bit later. But I love that. But it's cheaper, so you have to worry about no one buying it. And we might, see if anyone's interested. Being Bill was saying, see if this and that little indie label. I'm quite happy with it being on Bandcamp, but must promote it.
Yes,
just put it there and expect it. Well, it's there. Everyone should be able to see it. But yeah, I mean, that's what was. I realised that it wasn't as simple as, because of course, dear old John Peel's long gone. But
yes,
you can't just go and give it to whatever Mark Riley or something. It doesn't work like that. You've got to upload them to some, and I've got to find out about it really.
Yes, it's it's another thing that you think, oh God, that's going to be another 2 hours of my life being frustrated, uploading stuff and thinking it must be easier than this. But
yeah,
life, it's just, there's bits I love and bits I find quite boring. So a bit like cutting the grass, isn't it really? It's a bit overrated sometimes, social media. You just want to get on and do something a bit more interesting. But it's not brilliant. Anyway, look. Well, this has been fantastic. Well, I thought this has been a bit of an indie fest kind of journey. Actually, you're sort of got quite the story here, haven't you? Actually, which has been, there's a lot of things to unpick and unpack and go back and look at, and there you go. That's been, and you toured everywhere as well, haven't you?
Well, we were lucky. I think one of the best things was that when in that period you could travel to places and meet the people that lived there, and and play gigs with them, and you weren't being sort of totally a tourist. So it was a great kind of luxury really to be able to travel and see different places and experience it with locals, and we were lucky meeting all these lovely people we have, and around the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, look, thank you ever so
thanks
much.
for doing this. I mean, I don't really think about it, and like I say, I got a bad memory, but
well, no, it's
been quite fun to try and remember it all. Yeah.
Well, yes, we piece it together, and you've got the legends from Alan McGee to Thomas, is it Zimmerman from Germany? I mean, and Dan Tracy, Wham Records. I mean that is, if only you'd taken thousands of pictures, you could have published the book now, and everyone would have.
I might do a picture. There's a lot of my pictures of Dan are used all the time, and of course I don't get any of that. But I have. I was thinking of maybe doing a little self-publishing book of photos and stuff. But,
well, yeah, because actually there's a couple of people or places that do these kind of like A5, almost like fanzines, but they're quite nice. And actually they're fascinating. I'm always buying them because you just think, oh, actually they're just such great one-offs. And a guy, there's been quite a few people have been digging out their negatives and then just putting them together. Or sometimes a publisher goes, oh, actually, well, we could do something with that. So I do think it's worth checking out.
Have you got Sam Nee's books?
Yes.
Yeah, because there's quite a lot of my photos in some of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, they're good. And a guy called Joe Dilworth, who was in the Faith Healers, recently brought out a very nice book that he'd taken pictures of the late 80s and early 90s. And it captures the scene of gigs and also people's living rooms and kitchens and sort of being in pubs, and it's just like, my God, and the fags, the clothes, the mess, the kind of the style of everything. It's beautiful.
I think things like that are brilliant and very valid, and it is like it's kind of like a historical document, and it's good to record that, like there were other alternatives, like because when there were people being nostalgic for the 80s, it's all kind of, big shoulder pads and Duran Duran, and there's very little of us in our scruffy Oxfam suits and stuff, or, it's now has been documented, but things like Sam and all the rest of it. But, so it's good. I think that's a positive thing. Whereas I sometimes think, let's go forward, stop looking back. All this nostalgia and stuff. It's sort of like, do we need to, make a new record rather than sort of re-release the old ones? But I mean, I don't think I'm not going to go any of the indie stuff like that, because that's is worth rediscovering. Because, well, say things like Pebbles and all the British '60s sort of music that if you've never heard it, it's new music, isn't it? But I mean, I think endlessly re-releasing record, and you can't get a new record pressed because the few record plants are all sort of full up repressing Eagles' greatest hits or something, I mean, that kind of thing. But no, so I'm not having a go at you for doing your C86 thing, which is, I guess, kind of a little bit nostalgic, and I've really enjoyed it. So thank you.
Well, I agree with that whole sentiment, really, because I never want to think of it in rose-tinted sunglasses. But the bit that you said about the 80s, because I remember, the 80s was like told by a few people like Dylan Jones, and it was always about the Blitz Kids and Spandau Ballet, and the New Romantics and Duran Duran, and then Live Aid. And I remember thinking that wasn't really my 80s at all. I was a sort of indie kid who was all about angsty and and sort of a bit irritated by everything. And then obviously in the last, I think it's been quite recently, this whole other story of the 80s has come out, which I think is kind of good. And I think stuff like preserving those kind of like the Precious Recordings of London, getting those sessions. I mean, they're not the obvious sessions, but they're kind of valuable, because otherwise they would just all go into landfill. So I quite like the fact that there's been the books and the exhibitions and a certain narrative that's been retold. But like you, I the one thing I never want is, I mean, it's fine that bands do, but I don't want to go to see bands that I used to love. Particularly, I used to love the Smiths. I thought, God, and years ago, I thought, God, I'd never want the Smiths to reform. This was before Morrissey and his moments in life, because it's like they're captured in that time. They're not. It just if they'd been going all the time, that's fair enough. But to sort of to hate each other for 2 decades and then just come back just because you're going to get some more cash, it's just like, oh Jesus, please don't do that. Do something else. Like David Bowie was always, he made some
bit different.
He was always trying something different. Some of it was not great, but some of it was like, well, that's different, and that's a different sound, and that's
the saddest thing I remember. Totally backs up what you're saying. There was like the specials. I mean, I was lucky enough. I saw them quite a few times, but like, and there's enough film and TV of them, and they were like really, skinny, sort of 20-year-olds, sort of jumping about and really positive, and then they did something at Glastonbury. I only saw it on TV, and without Jerry Dammers, who of course was the specials in sort of extent. Terry Hall part. But
Yeah.
and they were just like these sort of shuffling old men, and you think, no, they got to be bouncy 20-year-olds. It's,
Yes.
and everybody, but I was the only, was no one else saying it. Everyone's going, oh, this is brilliant. This is specials. It's not the specials. It's their dads, and
Yes.
it's sort of, it's not, has nothing to do with the excitement, that the the youthful exuberance and energy. It's just sort of, it's wrong.
It's so wrong. No, I agree. I sometimes see people who've been to some of these events and they're filming it, and you think, I can understand why I hate it, because it's not in a small club and not everyone's like kind of sandwich, and you've got that atmosphere. People are standing there shuffling around, sort of looking at their phones, or just take a few, and you just think there's just zero atmosphere. But people can say they've seen the da-di-da, and you're thinking, but then when you see the pictures of them in those sweaty clubs with everybody, like pressed up, and you've been spending every weeks, months looking forward to that gig, and everybody's, and it's like, that's a bit sad. And when you keep seeing clips of, I don't know, Roger Daltrey wandering around a stage and Pete Townsend, you think, why are you doing that? It's like, I like the fact there are a lot of indie bands who've recently got together because they realise, they life, and and they just want to play the odd gig, and they'll do a few things, and they might make a new EP. And I don't knock that at all. I think that's quite sweet. But there's a fine line where you just think, no, that's just a bit tacky. But if you need the money that bad, then fine. For the bands who are having to get back and they hate each other, it's like, well, fair enough. But I don't really want to. It's a bit like, you don't want to be part of it, do you? Really? And when people say, God, it cost me 600 quid, you think, wow, it's like bands like that, we're at the Art Centre with like £3, and that's when you want to see a band, isn't it? When you're in a small club, but not when they're just to say, oh yeah, I've seen them, that's lovely, let's buy the t-shirt and go home. My back is aching. You think, not sure really. Anyway, there you go. Anyway, look, thank you ever so much for that.
You have to do much
today.
editing of these things when you.
No, I think, what the hell? People love them. They go, oh my God, I can't believe you got so and so. Because what I actually discovered, because sometimes, as you probably see if you look at my list, they're quite obscure. But actually, the more obscure, the better, because everyone
You're
else
adding
is
to that obscurity today.
the obscurity, because people think you don't want to hear another interview by so and so and so and so, because.
No.
But it's like, my God, that band, God,
I did have a little look through, and I think, oh, I've got to listen to this, I've got to listen to that. So I'm going to have to dive into some of your archive. Yeah.
Yes, I know, it's quite an interesting one. But yeah, like I said, it's, you just want to get the story of people before it's too late, because you just think, oh, they've just got those moments, haven't they? And you think, yes, interesting. But anyway, look, I hope, well, the main thing is you're making new music, and that's the main thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what matters. But anyway, look, I'll let you go now. But thank you ever so much. This has been amazing.
Lovely to meet you. And
Yeah, take care. And good luck with Gina on your next, your next project.
When we get to Norwich.
Norwich, a fine city. I know, they love it. Anyway, home of Alan Partridge. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that, dear listener, is the way to end a rock and roll interview. I know, I love those last bits, because they're so, for myself anyway, fumbly. I love to fumble. Anyway, a massive thank you to Mark for giving me the time for that interview. This has been the C86 Show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on any of the social media platform sites. Just do C86 Show. And also, all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Have a great week. Stay safe.